Well, indeed, thank you for staying with us here on Farm Kenya. Again, my name is Peter Wakaba. Now, in this second part of the show, we want to delve into our conversation around food systems, transformation, and governance. And as earlier promised, we will take a closer look at sustainable food systems and how they pave the way towards food and nutritional security. Now, with the challenges that are being posed by climate change, population growth, and diminishing natural resources, the need for food systems that can sustain future generations is now more than ever more necessary. Now, to help us understand these matters better, we're privileged to have two gentlemen with us here in studio. Evans Mswahili Ladema is the chairperson of the Lake Region Food Systems Network and is a member of the Kenya National Farmers Federation, KENAF. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in Development Studies, basic training in law, that is from the Legal Resource Foundation and Kituo cha Sheria. He is a biodiversity and agroecology enthusiast, a climate justice advocate, and a food systems transformation practitioner. Quite a mouthful right there. Yeah. Now, we also have Emmanuel Atamba, who is a food systems policy expert. Mr. Atamba has worked on the governance of food systems transformation in the Urban Food Futures project in Kenya. He has had an active role in the food systems landscape right across the country through his works on human rights to food and relevant policies. He has also previously worked in different agricultural development programs and initiatives across Kenya, Somalia, and Uganda. He is an agricultural economics major. Karibu sana to both of you. I'll start off with you, Atamba, and I want you to basically boil this down for us. People will hear others talk about food systems transformation. They'll talk about food systems transformation governance. What are food systems, and what are those two other terms? What do they mean?
Yeah, thanks, Peter, and thanks for hosting me.
Thank you.
I think when we talk about food systems, we are basically talking about how we handle, how we produce our food, how that food moves from one point to another, if we are adding value to the food, if we are doing processing to the food, how that process is handled, yes, and how eventually that food is consumed. And it does not only end there, it also looks at the entire journey that the food has gone. What are some of the impacts that that process has caused on people, on livelihoods, on environment, as well as also when you're talking about consumption, also the impact that it has on human health. So whether positive or negative impacts that our food system has. So it's the entire journey, but the most important thing is that we are also reflecting and saying how we grew these tomatoes. What did it do to the bees? What did it do to the pollinators? What did it do to the soil? And throughout the entire journey, who benefited in the process, who had the power to decide.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a whole spectrum of looking at food systems, but turning it upside down and again reevaluating and saying, okay, what are we doing? What are we impacting with how we grow, trade, or process and do all these things, and how we consume our food. So that is food systems in a nutshell.
Yes.
So to a layman, for me, I'll just say it's basically how we grow and consume our food. That is exactly what we are talking about in terms of food systems.
Then there's also, we'll talk about the transformational aspect.
Yes.
Because we know that these systems are like living organisms. They are constantly in motion. Talk to us about what that transformation means, and then the governance aspect.
So in terms of when you talk about transformation,
yes,
you transform something to move it from a situation that it already has or it's at to something else.
Yes.
And as we know, Wakaba, today, there are people who have not had lunch as we speak.
Yes.
And there are people who did not have breakfast, and there are people who are still in the streets not knowing whether they are going to have dinner or not. So that is one indicator that we need to transform our food systems, because we have not been able to achieve food security, sustainable food security for all. We have not been able to achieve nutrition goals. There are at least about 18% of children under 5 years who are stunted. And when you talk to people about it, they say, no, it's an improvement, because in 2014, it was 24% stunting rate. But it's not an improvement, because we still have 18% of all children under 5 years stunted. And when you are stunted, sometimes you're stunted for life. It really takes a lot of rigorous initiatives to convert that situation into something, into a different outcome. So that tells us that the nutrition quality of our food is wanting. We have issues of overweight and obesity also on the rise that affect all of us. And this also tells us that there's something wrong about our food systems. And then the other aspect is, again, when you look at our food systems vis-a-vis climate change issues, you see that we are having a very serious level of susceptibility to climate change impacts. You saw the floods the other day, and the first thing we are thinking about is, are we going to have unga? Are we going to have vegetables? Are we going to have milk because of the floods and all this? So we are at a situation where our food system is at risk, and therefore we need to secure that.
Yes.
So these are elements of transformation that we are looking at. So transforming food systems is addressing these needs, starting with the most primary responsibility or role of our food system, which is to ensure that each and every person has access to adequate food. And this is enshrined in the Constitution, Article 43(1)(c). So in a situation where even just one person in Kenya, I'm not saying one Kenyan, and I'm very deliberate about that, because it's not about only Kenyans. There are people in the streets in Nairobi today that are not Kenyans. But each and every person within our jurisdiction is supposed to have access to adequate food of sufficient quality and quantity. When that has not happened, it takes us back to think about what went wrong. Why is this person not having the food they need?
Very interesting. Yeah. And Evans Muswahili Ladema, this is where I want you to come in, because bearing in mind what he said,
yes.
But then we hear that, and we know that we live in a free market.
True.
And that people are supposed to work so they can then eat. So then where is the balance between ensuring that there is a thriving market that carries along people and their livelihoods, but also ensures that people get adequate nutrition and can eat?
Thank you. The answer to your question is addressed in the whole idea of sustainable food system that you alluded to in your introduction.
Yes.
Because a sustainable food system will ensure that we all get healthy and nutritious food. But again, the factors of production that are being used are available equitably. So that I'm not the only one who's able to produce, but any other person is also able to produce. And if they're not producing, then they have a role they can play along the food value chain. And it goes beyond that. Again, we want to look at a situation where even the people who work within the food ecosystem, be it farm workers, be it people who do trade in business, business in food, these people should equally get fair returns. So that at the end of the day, we are looking at an ecosystem that is taking care of everyone. No one is being left behind. No one is being treated unfairly. That they are all contributing to development of the food system. But at the end of the day, each one of them is walking away with good nutrition, with food, and with other accrued benefits, like when you talk about the economics of food production. Those that produce, like being a farmer like myself, I ought to produce, and at the end of the day, the returns from the work that I'm doing should be reasonable returns. But that should not be at a point when I've sold food very expensively to the consumer. So it is all boiling down to the kind of sustainability that we're referring to within the food system. If it is sustainable, it will ensure that all are fed and fed well, fed in terms of eating healthy food, food that is not poison to you, food that does not make you turn obese or hypertensive, food that does not bring other complications but makes your body to be good. It's of adequate amounts, of good quality, but again, affordable, accessible, and all those other...
So let's then talk about the power dynamics. Who gets to decide that this is what then will make it sustainable? So that who provides the access? Whose work is it to ensure the things that you're talking about?
It's a very interesting question in the sense that when we look at the way our food systems are structured today, you realize that those that hold, those that wield power in terms of political and economic power have a greater say. But to me, this should not be the case. To me, this should be the very primary producers, the farmers like myself, and other people who are involved in the extractive part of it, be it the fisher folk, should actually be holding the larger say. Because at the end of the day, these are the people who shoulder the burden of feeding all of us. And that a number of them are doing it not with a profit mission, but because they have passion for it. And therefore, if we were to transfer power into the hands of these people, I want to believe that whatever decisions that will be made at that particular point will be the right decisions. But as of now, to answer your question, I strongly feel that the power to make decisions around food systems it has become a reserve of the political and economic elite. Yeah.
So, Atamba, this week,
Yes.
The Africa Food Systems Forum is supposed to get underway in Kigali.
Yes.
And a lot of the things that we have seen, we have heard in the past, have people talking about the power dynamics as well, talking about, for example, this week there has been lots of conversation about indigenous seeds and the laws that have been put in place ostensibly, whether it's misinformation or not, to criminalize the multiplication, the storage, the sharing of indigenous seeds, so to say. While the opposite has also been done, because we've seen a formalization of and mainstreaming, so to say, of the foreign sourced, foreign developed hybrids, that sort of thing. And I'm not sure that's exactly right, but these are the things that people are talking about. This creates the sense that there is a power dynamic and that then the governance issue becomes interesting in this case. Where would we even begin to have this conversation?
You know, when you say people are talking about this, you are giving me an idea of where you discuss with people. But on a light note. But I think there has been a lot of controversy when it comes to the regulatory frameworks around our food. As Mr. Mswahili has rightly put it, you know, there's a contest between who should decide what and who should have more say than the other. The reality of it is that every single person and every single entity has a role to play. And here I would like us first to divide the food systems actors into three. You have the government, which serves as a regulator, but also which serves as the ultimate duty bearer when it comes to ensuring that everyone has the right to food. And this is in the Constitution, and the government can do nothing about it. That it is the responsibility of the government to ensure that every person has access to adequate food of sufficient quality. And when the government is not able to do that, we should be even suing the government. And this is an option that Kenyans should have. So when you're talking about prices going up and all that, the government is the ultimate responsible.
With various mechanisms to do that.
With various mechanisms to do that. But ultimately, you know, government works in different ways. Sometimes government works during the day, sometimes it works during the night. We don't care what time they work, but what we want to see at the end of the day is that Mswahili has the lunch that he needs to have. And if he has a child, that child has the nutrition that they need to have to grow, to be a human being.
The reason I was interjecting, Atamba, is because there are those who will tell you that the government of Kenya importing crude palm oil to sell into the market. Is government intervening in the market to do what you're saying?
No. So now, let's take it step by step. So the government has that responsibility. But of course, the government also has obligations that ensure that they do not do anything that is injurious to that same right. That they are not going, for example, if there is a growing market of edible oil in the country.
Or a shortage.
The government, let's say the government is supposed to encourage that we have local production because
facilitate.
So that then we have, sovereignty when it comes to that particular commodity. We have a robust maize sector, for example, subsector, for example. It is the responsibility of the government to ensure that whatever happens, that sector is, the productivity of that sector is able to be maintained to ensure that Kenyans are not waiting for maize coming from, different countries. But then you really don't have sovereignty around that. And that applies to all products. So the government has, in legal terms, we say the responsibility to ensure that there is no retrogression of rights. So if today I take over as president and the food security level is, let's say we only have 20% of Kenyans facing a mild level of food insecurity, I have the responsibility as the head of state or the government, the regime in place, to ensure that I do not now end up making 20% to be 21%. I can only make it better. So that should be something that we should also take the government into account. But when you talk about mechanisms part of the mechanisms is actually regulations.
Yes.
The government cannot do anything without requisite legal frameworks. So sometimes when I see some of the politics out there, there was this Ndengu bill that people are saying, oh, now you're going to be criminalized when you grow Ndengu. No, this is basically a proposal of a legal framework to safeguard the livelihoods of farmers that are engaging in this crop. Yes. And the challenge that we have, and that's why I was saying sometimes when people talk about these things, they really, hype them. Is, they distort the information that is there, is that we are also, as actors in this space, blocking the government from fulfilling its mandate by creating a lot of misinformation about some of the existing legal frameworks. On the seeds thing, for example, it is called the Seed and Plant Varieties Act for a reason. When you talk about plant varieties, not everything you see green is a plant variety. A plant variety is a variety that has been registered by KEFIS. So KEFIS holds the list of varieties. So the entire seed law is based on exactly that list that is held by KEFIS as the list of varieties. So not all the maize that is existing in Kenya are maize varieties. So we don't even have indigenous varieties. We can only have indigenous seeds or indigenous cultivars. So that misinformation that exists, creates a lot of distortion, creates a lot of noise. Civil society organizations sometimes, we also spend a lot of money in really chasing what was called, hot air. We are chasing hot, instead of really focusing on how can we strengthen the legal frameworks to ensure that each Kenyan participating in food systems is able to earn a living and a viable, livelihood for that matter. And the people who are waiting for that system to deliver food to them are also able to get their fair share that is safe and adequate.
Yes, I want to bring in Mr. Ladema because I think you said something quite interesting in the last bit there. The fact that we all have a role to play, and that we're expected to first hold government to account and then play a role in the governance aspect. But most people, as a person, it might be very difficult to understand these things, might be very difficult to have access. What then is the role of being members? You mentioned that you're a member of KENAF.
Oh, yes.
What role does organizing yourself into bodies such as this then give you? What ability does it confer on you as a person because you're organized? What are the benefits?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. The fact that farmers of this country have come together under a collective known as KENAF is something that is very progressive in the sense that it seeks actually to address some of those challenges that you're alluding to.
Yes.
The fact that we are at different levels of understanding, we are at different levels of exposure, we are at different levels of even education and knowledge acquisition means that when we come together, regardless of the differences in our capacities, we are able to organize and mobilize as institutions that then can have power to engage government and engage government meaningfully, power to engage the private sector and other service providers and engage them meaningfully, and ensure that whatever knowledge and capacity gaps that were there in the constituency that we come from are mitigated for when we speak in one voice and when we have one agency. And I want to believe this is really happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you engage on the basis of trust? Because we know that is one commodity in Kenya which has been really so. In fact, many people listening to Mr. Saba simply may be saying, we know where he's speaking from. And I said speak because I've engaged both in at the professional level.
Yes.
And I've engaged, as we say, at the banter level, at the grassroots.
Yeah.
And the consensus, even from people who are completely learned and are scientists, they push back and say that sometimes they don't really believe what is being talked about and that sort of thing. How do we begin to build trust in the systems, trust in the information, and then, of course, the verification aspect?
True. Among the many tragedies that happened to Kenya, the lack of trust is one among those tragedies. And it's something that we all must work very hard to come out of because Kenyans have been lied to for far too long and for so much that they can hardly believe anything that comes by.
They become cynical.
Exactly, they're so cynical, and we won't blame them for that.
Yes.
But what I'm trying to imagine here is that we all need to try our level best to try and live by the dictates of our constitution. Because if we go by the dictates of our constitution and we have that constitutionalism in us, we'll be able to start respecting things like our national values and principles of governance, for example. Where now, if it's a question of maybe organizing things like public participation, we have a brilliant idea that is emanating from government or even the private sector, and it has to get into, you know, the greater public.
Yes.
Then we have public participation that is organized with very good intentions, where the public is, you know, very well facilitated to be able to engage and participate, and whatever that comes out of the public is again put into consideration. I want to believe if we were to work on things like those ones, we undertake meaningful public participation and civic engagement, we ensure we reduce the kind of incoherence in the way we speak as duty bearers, and I know we'll come to that at some point.
Yes.
Then we'll nurture and grow some trust in the population that will then make it easy for us even to roll out programs, come up with the new initiatives that will have a very good uptake without people being doubting Thomases. But before I proceed,
yes,
I want to believe that I didn't adequately answer your previous question, because you wanted to know from me how institutions like KENAF then ensure that
farmers are adequately represented.
Exactly. Yeah. Among the many things we do is to, you know, take advantage of the governance processes that are there. For instance, in our counties, you know that we go through a 5-year cycle of planning and budgeting.
Yes.
So my institution, that is KENAF, what we did was to ensure that at the very onset, when the county governments were organizing for preparation of the third generation CIDP, many of our members were in those, you know, public participation forums.
Yes.
And they just didn't go for purposes of going. They went after we had sat and discussed and said, these are some of our priorities. So that each and every member from our organization is going to push for those particular priorities for consideration. Yeah, so public participation.
And just to remind people that CIDP is the County Integrated Development Plan.
Oh yes. The County Integrated Development Plan. And that is very important for all Kenyans countrywide, because we know that a substantial amount of the agriculture function has been devolved. And therefore, when it comes to farmers having their voice and participating in decision making at that level in the county, then the CIDP becomes one such avenue that is very good. Yeah.
Atamba, we are going to a short break, but before we go, very briefly, on the same issue of trust, you find a lot of time that we've abrogated the responsibility of talking about really important things, mostly to politicians and others, and this has perpetuated the challenges that we have, including people being taken advantage of. How, in your opinion, should we start to take this trust back?
Yeah, I think Mswahili has really nailed it. It's really a question about having the right information, creating awareness, and you know, understanding. And I think it is Patrice Lumumba, PLO, who said that politicians do not become geniuses through the ballot. So understanding that politicians can also make mistakes, and being ready as the people who put the politicians there to put them in check. The news that I just saw, for example, sitting here, that now the new cooperative CS has put in 500 million shillings towards KCC, the new KCC. Let's remember that the same government in December 2023 had listed KCC for privatization. And that case is still in court. And the person who took that case to court has now joined government. So are we putting 500 million before we sell, or have we now said as government that we are not going to sell it?
So have we cured the problem?
Have we cured the problem? And you see a lot of companies who are put on the list to be sold. Some of them are profit generating, like Kenya Seed Company, for example. And you can see even in the news item today about the Kenya Seed and about the importance of seed, yet the same government lists this company to be sold.
And strategic importance.
Yeah, so let Kenyans know that we elected our cousins, we elected our friends, we elected our schoolmates, and they are not geniuses. So let's also remember that it is our responsibility to remind them that Peter, hapa umechoma, so that we can keep the politicians in line and ensure that our interests are taken care of.
Okay, interesting. So we want to go to that break now, but when we come back, gentlemen, I want us to then walk step by step through the entire production, through the entire beneficiation, through the entire going to market process. So we are then able to look at the various governance and participation aspects that farmers might enjoy, and then critique what has been done and what they can do to get into this space. But that, of course, is right after the break. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Do stay with us here on Farm Kenya. That's in 2 minutes.